Hi guys, it's Presley. In an effort to keep us on track and stuff with your notes, I'm going to do this flip lesson where I record the audio and stuff of me explaining the notes for you to be able to catch via YouTube. If you need to go over things again, you can always pause, rewind, play it back. And the only function I can't do is draw on this one, so I'm going to attempt to type a little bit and hopefully that helps. If not, get a hold of me via Twitter, BA_Presley, or email me at apresley@baschools.org. All right, I think this is where we left off. We were talking about how the song had reunified China after about 50 years of the Three Kingdoms being in civil war. During this time, of course, you're going to have a lot of economic development and a lot of invention sharing and stuff now that they're reunited. So there's just a lot of growth and discovery that happens during that time. The Song Dynasty was also what we call a meritocracy. That means that the officials who are helping run the country are chosen based on their merit, how they pass the test. So there's this civil service exam, but we talked about this exam and how they're really difficult, they're expensive to buy the books for, you have to have the time to study and memorize 4, 5, 6 different huge novel length books. What this really means is that the lower classes can't afford to take the exams. So we have a situation where you have an elite kind of ruling class. Arts and inventions during this area are going to focus largely on religious, particularly Buddhist ideas, and nature. You're going to have a lot of poems that focus on these things too. Sculptures and celadon. Celadon is a glazing process for China. This is kind of light green color you see over here. It's unique to China for a long time. Only the Chinese knew how to do it. Eventually the Chinese are going to kind of share with the Koreans when they take over areas of Korea. So they're going to kind of perfect this celadon technique. I just realized I covered up some of my typing. Printing is going to lead to a widespread sharing of knowledge. So you're going to get, with the ease and advantage of the invention of paper under the Han Dynasty, you're going to see a lot more books being printed and made. Again, you're going to see advancements in other areas like warfare, science, and medicine. Foot binding is going to kind of begin under the Tang and continue for about 1,000 years. This all starts with an emperor, legend has it, that an emperor saw one of his concubines dancing on a table, and he was so turned on by her dainty wrapped feet that people took notice. And it becomes something that highborn ladies are going to do, and it eventually turns into this real kind of symbol of female attractiveness, sexiness, and also her position in society, because as you see when you get to these pictures, someone whose feet have been bound and grown in this position are not going to be able to stand on their feet for long periods of time and be a laboring worker. So foot binding is an attempt to stop the growth of the feet. Between the ages of 4 and 7, a bandage that's about 10 feet long and a couple inches wide would be wrapped tightly around a young girl's foot, forcing those 4 smaller toes under the sole of the foot. This makes the foot narrower. At the same time, though, the way that the bandage is wrapped, it's going to make the foot shorter because it's going to force the big toe and the heel closer together by bowing the arch of the foot. The bandage is going to get tightened several times a day at first, and eventually, once a day over the course of a 2-year process. That's progressively going to make the girl's foot smaller and smaller. It's a very painful process, very disfiguring process, but again, it becomes tied with ideals of sexuality, femininity, and attractiveness. So the old saying was, if you love your daughter, bind her feet. If you love your son, you're going to send him to get study. So the next few slides here are pictures of a woman's bound foot, and this is a lotus flower shoe. This would be hand embroidered, very detailed embroidery, and to draw attention to a dainty little foot. Now, bound foot had 3 different levels. You had the golden lotus, again referring to the shape of it. The golden lotus was the ideal of a 3-inch foot. 4 inches was considered a silver lotus, and then anything bigger than that was considered iron. We're going to start here in a second a documentary. It's only maybe about 8 minutes long, so it should be enough to kind of help you finish out the rest of the hour. But it's one National Geographic did on foot binding, where they kind of interview some of the older ladies, because foot binding existed until about the 1950s, when it became illegal under communist rule. But at the moment, there are still some women around who have had their feet bound, and they interview a few of them. So hang on, we'll start that here in a sec.
The dainty, tremulous steps of this Peking opera actress are a modern recreation of a once widespread custom in China. Her tiny feet, no more than 3 inches in length, are in fact false. Her real feet are concealed in specially designed supports above them. But for millions of women in the past, the possession of 3-inch feet, or golden lotuses as they were revered, was a stark and painful reality. Ordained by male and female society as the epitome of feminine beauty, into these tiny, finely embroidered lotus slippers and shoes, Chinese women fitted their tightly bound feet. But beneath the layers of mystery and embroidery and bindings and perfume, lay almost unimaginable torment and pain. Torment and pain that would haunt an entire nation's women for over 1,000 years. This is the Golden Lotus Dance, and it is found almost nowhere else in the world. Here, in Yunnan province in southwestern China, are sufficient dancers with bound feet. It is nearly a century since the custom of foot binding was banned by China's first Republican government. There are no official statistics as to how many bound-footed women remain among China's 1.25 billion citizens. Today, it is almost impossible to comprehend the reasoning behind this strange and brutal custom. At its peak, foot binding was a socially mandatory practice for Han women throughout China, rich or poor alike. The village of Liuyi in Yunnan province. With around 300 bound-footed women in the vicinity, there are 104 in this village alone, and all are aged between 17 and 19. These old women, who have lived in this village for most of their lives, are the final chapter in the history of foot binding. "77-year-old Lo Yuyuan and 80-year-old Chai Fuyuan are in-laws. Lo's feet were bound at the age of 5, and she was married at the age of 14. She has 2 sons and 1 daughter. Chai, the smaller of the 2 women, had her feet bound when she was only 4, and was also married at 14. She has 1 son and 4 daughters.
所以是大家的以色列你他们4岁5岁不嫁过，不过我们你小的说啊，做个娘生些姑娘，然后旧的别啥过，是大的别样子啊。你发过的小妹好好。娘们说不过小没有了在哪？娘们要怎么过小？
The custom was carried out with a binding bandage made of coarse cotton cloth, measuring 3 inches in width and 7 or 8 feet in length. This is a foot-binding stool of the Qing dynasty. The child of a wealthy family would sit on a bed with her feet placed on the stool. The special roller was used to tighten the binding bandage. Inside the little drawers were scissors, perfume, and alum, all essential for the beautifying ritual. Customs varied from province to province. Foot binding was initiated at the age of 4 for some, or as late as 8 for others, and was usually performed by the girl's own mother, although wealthy families would engage the services of a binding woman. For parents, believing that foot binding had a lifelong impact on their daughter's future wealth and social standing, and therefore happiness, picking an auspicious day for the event was important. From what we see now only as the astonishing mutilation that resulted from foot binding, it is difficult to remember that for the Chinese, it was once thought of as the height of sensuality. All the toes except the big one were folded under and bound tightly to bring them close to the sole. The feet were known as golden lotuses only if they were 3 inches long, silver if they were 4 inches long, or iron if they were more than 4 inches long. Feet were bound in 5 or 7 layers of bandages. Often mothers would sew up the punishing bindings in order to prevent their daughters from secretly removing them in bed at night. As the feet grew, so the bindings were tightened.
说明前面过妆到回笼之间嘛，朝了用个轻轻的过，轻轻的过了嘛，还是晚上也是不耐烦，还是要给你那个床前不个睡的，睡不到，回来好，洗了好，我们还是有过。
For over 1,000 years, countless Chinese girls were disabled or even died during the course of this practice. Often the feet were broken. Paralysis, gangrene, and ulcers were commonplace. Girls in the early stages of foot binding would have their bandages tightened twice a day. The pain was excruciating and unrelenting for up to 2 years before gradually subsiding, leaving the foot permanently contorted. Only then could the human foot become the ultimate symbol of beauty, the golden lotus. Chai is 5 feet 1 inch tall. An average woman of her height has a 9-inch long foot. Chai's deformed little foot measures only 5. All the toes except the big one, which still protrudes, are deformed and bent, hidden under the sole, and the 2 smallest toes have been completely disabled. The instep has been bent to form an arch. The bridge bulges markedly, and a cleft has been formed in the middle of the sole. The joint between the foot and the heel is fractured. Because of this severely restricted growth, the lower legs of bound-footed women are incredibly thin. So why was it considered a symbol of beauty? The answer to this question can be traced back to a peculiar style of imperial entertainment some 1,000 years ago. It is generally believed among the Chinese that foot binding originated in the 10th century, during what is known as the Epoch of 5 Dynasties. It is said that ruler Li Yu of the Southern Tang dynasty doted on a palace concubine, Yao Niang, who was a superb dancer. The emperor demanded that Yao Niang wrap her feet in cloth to make them smaller and look like moon crescents. He further made the concubine dance on a specially made lotus stage. The spectacle so seduced the emperor that the royal obsession escalated into a craze and permeated through the imperial courts, becoming ever more extreme as it did so, and inspiring art and literature as it went.